Hi, Edward. How are
Hello, how are you?
you?
I'm good, thanks.
Welcome, welcome. It's good to have you on.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, firstly, apologies for last week. Thank you for accommodating the change. Much
Oh, no
appreciated.
worries.
Yeah. It's just that I'm not sure how familiar you are with South Africa. So I travel a lot between Durban and Johannesburg, South Africa. So for the first time when I was in Durban, the connectivity was just terrible. Like I did a few shows while I was there, you know, push my luck. It went okay. But towards then I was like, no, let me rather get back in studio and okay, stable network, and then we'll have a good chat. So
Well, yeah, I
yeah.
do a podcast myself, so I know about the things that you talked about.
Technology isn't perfect, eh? It's not
Yes.
perfect at all. So we just do our best to work around it. But I'm so grateful, when the guests are accommodating when those things do happen. So yeah. So we have a lot to unfold here within the next 45 to 1 hour. Actually, while I was reading about you, so I had the privilege of also meeting like the Hollywood version of Edward.
There is one.
Once upon a time on the podcast. Because as I was reading about your work and you know your publishing company and how you bring so many different diverse authors together, there's actually another publisher also based in Hollywood who has like the similar mandate as you. So
Hmm.
it'll be quite interesting, for myself personally as well as the listeners, to get how it goes for you actually in Hollywood. I mean, sorry, in Canada, and your whole mandate. And the crazy part about it is also around fantasy, also illustration, with writing. So yeah, it's going to be awesome to get your take on it. But before we jump into your work, let's chat about you, where it all started for you, because you yourself, you also an author.
Well, yes, I'm primarily an author. Actually, the publishing is something that's come along very late and is kind of uh, keeps me busy, but I'm still writing as well, and
Yeah,
actually trying to
yeah.
balance it better so I do more writing. Well, I was born in Silver City, New Mexico, and we moved up here from Texas when I was a kid. So I'm living in
Oh, I
McLean,
get the look. I get the look. Right. The Mexican look. Okay.
So I moved up here when I was a kid, and I was always a big reader. And I skipped a grade actually because I learned to read before I got into grade one. So I was in grade one for 10 days, and they said, "Nope, you're going on up to grade two." So I was always the youngest person in my class because of that. So anyway, I was a huge reader, and I don't know, somewhere along in there, I decided to start writing. I know when I wrote my first complete short story, I was 11 years old, and it was just something to do on a rainy day. And I finished it. It was called Castor Glass Hypership Test Pilot because I was already very much tied into science fiction as a reader at the time. Had two older brothers who had it, in the house, so that kind of got me into it. And
Yeah.
I had a teacher. I was in grade eight, I guess, and my grade, yeah, eight. Yeah, I think I was in grade eight because of being so young, even though I was 11. My teacher took a look at it and he did me the honor of taking it seriously and saying, "Well, I don't understand why your characters did this, and this didn't really work for me." And I've credited him ever since. In fact, I dedicated a book to him a few years ago for getting me more focused on making everything I wrote better. And so I just kept going from there. I wrote three novels in high school, um, and
Wow.
and I rewrote the first one, so I guess that made four by the time I was in college. And I just kept going. I studied journalism. I started my career as a newspaper reporter and edit. I went back to the States for university in Arkansas. I came up here. I started my career in my hometown newspaper as a reporter photographer. At the age of 24, I was editing the newspaper. And then at the age of 28, I left
Yeah.
and started working as a communications officer at the Saskatchewan Science Center. And in 1993, I quit that job and I've been a full time writer and now publisher ever since.
I think the first question after all of that I should ask you is how do you handle it all? Like, what haven't you done?
I feel the odd thing is that people will comment on, oh, you do so much and how do you do all that? And I'm always thinking I'm way too
Yeah.
lazy and I could do so much more if I worked harder. So I don't know. It's part of it's just practice. I've now worked with words. I was 20 years old when I started working at the newspaper. I'd already written, as I said, 4 novels. My first short story was sold somewhere when I was in my 20s, and I sold a couple of other things along in there. It was quite a while before I had a novel, but I kept writing. So I was cranking out words, and at the newspaper, I'd write 2 or 3 feature articles a week. It was a weekly, plus all the news items. So the words, just words, 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 words. And so words come naturally to me, and I work with them very well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, being a creator, we are our worst critics. So no matter how much we do, how much we put in, we're always going to tell ourselves we could have done better, we can do more. But how much is more actually? And that's how we just turn out at the end of the day. For me personally, I learned that the hard way. How much more can you do? Actually in doing less, you find yourself being more creative.
Yeah, it's certainly possible to overextend yourself. That's for sure. And sometimes you need a little recharging time to, especially between projects. If you finish some major projects, you need some time to recharge before you can really launch into something else and give it its best, for sure.
So I know what works for you or works for me is not going to work for an independent author or creative, sitting out there listening to the show. But what tips can you share, on that, especially in this digital independent era where, you can do it all yourself these days? What tips would you share, with young creatives, with regards to time management, giving yourself some time out, the buzz and the rush of it all, of wanting to get your work to market, even as a musician?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I'm old. So when I started writing the current...
You don't look that old.
Well, I'm 65, so old enough. So
wow.
I started well before.
I would never say.
Oh, thank you. It's because I kept my hair. So
yeah.
We never have. This stuff didn't exist until, all of my publishing was through the traditional type stuff up and send it in, and I wasn't even doing electronic submissions until much later in my career. So it's a little different now, and although I'm kind of in that space, I don't know that I'm up on the latest things for how to make it work. But all I can say is the advice I give everybody who asks me about writing is there's 2 things. The most important thing you can do is read. You can't write if you're not reading. You have to have that. You have to see how other people are dealing with the challenges of writing stories. And we're all dealing, trying to solve the same problems in our writing. And by flooding your mind with good writing, you are priming it to then start to write well yourself. So that's always my first. The second advice is just do it. It's, that's Nike, I guess, but it's still true. Just do it. Write, and do the research to find out how you can get your words out there. And there's a million ways now to get out there. At the same time, there's a million people doing it. So visibility remains hard. Even with the traditional publisher, I'm not exactly a household name, even though I had 12 books through a New York publisher. So there are no easy solutions for any of this. It's just a matter of doing it and keep working, keep plugging away. I think what I've always liked, a phrase that I think it was Stephen King said, that anyone who can be discouraged from writing should be, but if you can't be discouraged from it and you keep doing it, that's the only way you ever get anywhere. If you give up, obviously nothing happens. So all you can do is keep trying, and there's no guarantees, but for some people it really works out big time.
Yeah, I mean, God is going to reward those that actually put in the effort and try, no matter how long it takes.
Yeah, the Lord helps those who help themselves.
He's going to test. Yeah, exactly. Also, I mean, one thing I learned, which I always knew back of my mind, it was sitting there, is that environment is so important as well. And I realized that over the last few weeks for myself, with my work, okay? Even though I'm in the music industry, with writing blogs is as far as I've gone, and a short playbook, for independent artists. but I'm not an author. Okay. But even with my musical work, like being in the correct environment as a creator brings out, your best. It honestly does. So,
I think that
for listeners out there, just on top of what you just said, is also before you get into writing, make sure that you're in an environment that brings out your best. Not an environment that's dark and gloomy and makes you feel depressed and sad. And I got irritating neighbors, or whatever the case may be. That I find also is extremely important.
yeah,
Find
I
your
find that
space and
having
stick
I
with
don't
it.
actually write in here in this very nice office. I do other things in here like desktop publishing and playing Civilization and important things like that. Most of my writing takes place on a laptop, and mostly when I'm writing fiction, I try to get out of the house and be out somewhere. I like to be in I do a lot of writing in coffee shops or pubs or whatever, and that seems to be where I'm most productive. But it's different for everyone. And in my podcast, the Worldshapers, which for the first 5 years was entirely focused on the creative process of science fiction and fantasy authors, if you go and listen to some of those, you'll find out that every single author is different. Some plop themselves down in their home office and plug
Yeah.
away. Some of them, I only think one was like to handwrite anymore. There's a couple of them that like to write things out by hand. I would never do that because my handwriting's terrible. But yeah, it's a little different for everyone. But you need to find that way that works for you, and that way that keeps those creative juices flowing.
Yeah, 100%. Moral of the story is find what works for you.
Yeah.
So can you repeat the name of the podcast again? So hopefully we can get listeners, onto it, up becoming independent authors.
Sure.
And then I'll also include it in the description.
It's called The Worldshapers. It started in 2018. After I started the publish. No, wait a minute. Well, there was about the same time as I started the publishing company. And I had a book coming out called Worldshaper from Daw Books, my New York publisher. And I knew a lot of authors by that point because I'd been going to science fiction conventions, and I knew I could get some big name authors right off the bat. So I started with people like Robert J. Sawyer and Tanya Huff, John Scalzi, Julie Cherneda. These are all well-known names in the field. And I focused on the creative process. And so it went for about 5 years. It was about every 2 weeks. And then the focus changed a little bit, but it's still going. I now interview authors in a wider range of genres. And it now looks like this because I use StreamYard. So it looks exactly like this. Usually, from my point of view, I'm usually on the other side of the screen here. And it's on YouTube, and it has its own website at theworldshapers.com with links to everything. It's up to getting very close to episode 200. It would be more, except I don't do it every week. I do it like once every 2 weeks.
Nice.
Oh, and it's one.
I guess
Aurora.
that's all. Nice. What I was saying was, it's crazy how all podcasts actually start. You start with that one specific niche, that part of the industry, and as it evolves, it just branches out, and then you adapt to that.
Yeah, I
so
changed
with
it
your
because
podcast, no, sorry, you first.
I was just going to say I changed it because I wanted to be able to interview the authors I was publishing, and they didn't all write science fiction and fantasy. So that's why I decided to broaden it out into other genres.
Okay. So, I mean, to sum it all up with the podcast, I mean, it's a great space for people to go into, to listen or to watch on YouTube, being in the space, because now you still touching on the creative process, but, we're also getting insights on what other authors have done with their career, which is great, This is great. So on to so it was the podcast. Okay, it started at the same time. Now, with Shapers of the World, okay, what was the mandate around that? What made the spark go off to say, okay, I'm going to bring, several authors into one book and push it out to market? And what to you, coming from your heart to the listeners, is so special about sci-fi and fantasy? Why those genres?
The podcast started and had run for a little while, and I had started the publishing. I guess the publishing company came in. I think I put out my first book in April of 2018. It was very small. I was just doing print on demand and ebooks at the time. But I joined Sask Books, which is the Saskatchewan Publishers Association. I'm now vice president of. And at the annual meeting in 2019, I guess, they had somebody doing a presentation on kickstarting an anthology. She was from Winnipeg, and she raised way more money than I've ever raised in a Kickstarter, but she was tied into the comics side of things, and comics people are really big on Kickstarters. So I thought, hey, I know some authors, and it took me a while because it was a big, a little intimidating looking into Kickstarter and trying to figure out how to make it work and how much work was involved. But later that year, I after the first year of the podcast, I realized, well, that was a natural place to do it, like 1 year at a time. So I reached out to the guests of the first year of the podcast and asked them if they would be interested in contributing either an original story or a reprint for an anthology I was thinking of kickstarting. And I had 18 authors said yes. The first one was about split between reprints and new work. But again, I had major authors in there: David Brin, Joe Haldeman, John Scalzi, Tanya Huff. Some really big names were in there. And I ran the Kickstarter, and it succeeded. And so the book came out, and that was the first one. And so, well, that worked. And so I did it every year after that. So for the next 5 years, 1 year's worth of authors, I would ask, would you like to be part of the Shapers of Worlds anthology for this year? And they would send me stories, and I would edit them and do the Kickstarter. And so they all succeeded, and bring them out. And so Shapers of Worlds Volume 5, which just came out, it will be the last in that series of anthologies because I've changed the focus of the podcast. It's not just science fiction and fantasy authors anymore. As for why it's science fiction and fantasy, why that drew me in, that's just always been when I start writing, that's where my stories go. It's not that I can't write a story without something fantastic in it, but why would I? So all my stories that I write myself, it's always been in the science fiction and fantasy realm. And what draws me to that, and always has, both as a reader and as a writer, is that it's the ultimate playground of the imagination. Science fiction is a little different. You need to pay at least homage to the natural laws as we understand them. Although with hand waving, you can get around a lot of them with advanced technology and so forth. And with fantasy, it's even wider open. I mean, if you want to do a fantasy epic that involves talking cats on heroic quests, well, you can. And Tad Williams did it, and it was a huge hit. So, wizards in school, that seems to work out all right for some people. So, but that's what's drawn me to it, and it's always been the thing that I've read, and always the thing that I write. And I just like the mind expanding. It's my mind expanding drug. Is science fiction and fantasy.
And you never ever thought about keeping the series going, but branching out also with other genres, with another book?
No, it is what it is. And one reason that it worked was because it involved so many authors who already have substantial followings. I mean, there's authors in there who are, new or don't have a huge following, but I've also had international bestsellers in there. And that certainly helps on the making the Kickstarter work side, because I was looking for something neighborhood of $15,000 Canadian for each one, and got that for each one. But had I doing that with people who weren't as well known, I'd probably have to drop that down. And I didn't want to do that because I insisted that I was paying a reasonable rate. So I paid 10 cents a word for Canadian for original stories, and 5 cents a word for reprints, up to a maximum of 5,000 words. And five just seemed, as I say in the intro to this one, it's not a round number, but it sort of feels like a round number. It's just a nice number to have. 5 books, that seems like a good set of books. And now I can go on. I'll be kickstarting other things, I'm sure, but it won't be this. There's a possibility of another anthology next year. That would be quite different. But so it just seemed like a good place to wrap up.
And this is a project that's done yearly. New book, new year, new book.
Basically, well,
when it comes to choosing the authors, when it comes to choosing the authors, what's the process there? Like, what are the steps to follow? Is this open to any? Now moving forward, will it be something open to any and all authors out in the world where they can, jump onto your website and submit their story, and then you're like, okay, cool, we'd love to have this in the book, and you take it from there?
I don't know yet if there's parts of the coming anthology I can't talk about yet because there's an announcement coming that relates to it. But I'm still not entirely sure what it will look like. So I don't know for sure. I imagine there will be, at some point, there'll be an open, there'd be some anchor authors and then an open call for some of the other spots. Maybe, I don't know. for the ones that I've done, they were strictly by invitation, and they were strictly people who had been on the podcast. And that's kind of one thing that makes them a bit unique. Most anthologies have a theme. So you'll have, like I've been in anthologies, what if the ancient gods were around today? What would they be doing? And I wrote a story about the ancient Sumerian god of brewing and beer, who was, of course, running a brew pub, because what else would she be doing in the modern world? So a lot of themes like that. Another one I did was based on the idea of a technology that had lost its original purpose but was still going, things like that. But this one had no theme, except that these people were all guests, and as a result, you've got everything in there from young adult fantasy to hard science fiction to far future science fiction, near future stuff, epic, tinging on horror in some cases. So I kept trying to come up with new metaphors for them, and I think the best one is probably, cupboard of curiosities or cabinet of curiosities, those old 17th century, 18th century collections of interesting items that rich people would pull together and show off to their friends, which turned into museums and natural history museums, was one example. But I think the best one may be the potluck dinner, where everybody brings a dish, and when you eat, they're all very different, but you have a satisfying meal.
Do you ever find yourself in a situation, like, because you mentioned ancient gods, say now you bring like an ancient god back in the day, and now you're going based just on, imagination and what's flowing, through your head. But do you ever like find yourself in a situation where you need to fact check like some stuff? To ensure that someone doesn't read it and be like, okay, he's mentioned an ancient god here, and what that ancient god will be doing in 2025. But then this ancient god was more of that type of god.
Yeah, it wasn't so much in that particular one. There wasn't that much to it. First of all, we don't know that much about the ancient Sumerians. I think we don't have much more than a name and a beer recipe connected to this particular goddess.
Yeah.
But so, your imagination can fill in any blanks that are there. What more often happens is in novels, I will run into things that I need to research, and the research can then open up other possibilities. Trilogy I did called The Masks of Agrima under the pen name E.C. Blake. There was this kind of mine, and I had to get people up and down the levels of the mine. And ladders are boring, but the technology doesn't support elevators, does it? But then I went looking, and I found out that, in fact, in Germany, and other places, there were mines that used, I can't remember what they were called exactly, but they used water wheels to drive reciprocating piles, which then through the gears would go this way. And so you'd have platforms going up and down, and you could step from one platform to the next as they met and then be carried on down or up again, which sounds terrifying if you think about it in a mine shaft. But then reading that then informed the whole scene, because that research gave me images I hadn't had before, that then went into the book. And I think that happens more often. I start off with pure imagination, and then occasionally I need to look something up, like it could be related to horses or swords or something. There's an old writing adage to write what you know, but I think what it really is write what you can imagine and what you can find out about. And once you've imagined it and found out about it, then I guess you know it. You can write about it.
Yeah. Okay, that's quite interesting. I got to ask also. So say, okay, I am a fantasy author, okay, hypothetically speaking, but my subconscious mind, in my long-term memory, has taken some experience that's happened in my life. And now I'm writing. I may think, okay, I'm writing, out of imagination, but it's actually something that's stuck within my subconscious mind. Is that like something that happens?
Well, actually, when we talk about making things up, we are entirely dealing with whatever is in the back of our mind, because the only thing we really know is ourselves, and we may not even know ourselves very well. But everything we write about is based on what we have taken into our mind. So yeah, if I have writing some sort of character interaction, it doesn't matter if those characters are aliens of some sort, or humans, or whatever they are, robots. But if they're a character that I'm writing about, any interaction they have with other characters is going to be based on the interactions I've either had or observed in my own life. So really, even when you're making up the wildest things, the only raw material you have is what's in the back of your head here that you're digging through all the time. and it might be subconscious that comes through. There's certainly, I think, because at least when I'm writing, the words flow out of my fingers faster than I'm consciously thinking them. It's just they seem to flow out. And that's clearly your subconscious is doing a lot of work back there and just keeping your fingers typing. So still, you're only working with what you've got in your own head at all times, no matter what it is that you're writing. And that actually goes back to what I said about the advice about reading, because your personal experiences are very important, and you may be able to draw things in that you can then really grip hold of. But at the same time, you have to write about things that you haven't had personal experiences of, unless you're writing very autobiographical fiction. And that's where the reading comes in, and watching things and all of that. But reading, I think, again, goes to the core of being a writer. It's like if you're going to be a musician, and I do music too, you have to do music. You have to listen to music. You have to understand how chords progress and rhythm works and what harmonies sound like and all of that sort of thing. And it's the same thing with writing. You have to draw in all that material that you can then shape. You have to have something to work with.
Yeah, 100%. And what's your take on, just to add more juice to this conversation, what's your take on like quantum physics and 9 dimensions, different realities? Has anyone ever written stories around that?
Well, the multiple worlds hypothesis is constantly used in science fiction, and has been long before it really hit the kind of public consciousness, I think. So yeah, it's actually I did kind of. Worldshaper was about a series of pocket worlds that were in some alternate dimension and it reads like fantasy, but it actually has a science fiction backstory in that it's super technology behind all of this, in which people from our world go into what's basically a blank space and then create the world that they would like. And so the first one would seem like a version of our world because the shaper didn't know that she shaped it. And when she found out, things really got interesting. The second one was in a Jules Verne world. The third one was in a vampires and werewolf world. But all of these were really pocket universes. So it's a bit of that multiple world kind of a thing. If you buy into the multiple world hypothesis completely, there are an infinite number. Anything that can possibly happen has happened and is happening in some slice just over here. There's a version of me that just did his hands in the other direction, or his hair all just suddenly fell out, or he dropped dead at this moment, or the house burst into flames. And that just happened everywhere because it's infinite and we can't really get our heads around that. So it's a useful conceit, and it does get used quite a bit in science fiction, and has for a long time.
Yeah. No, I enjoy the whole subject of quantum physics. Deep down I believe that there is multiple realities, and this is just my opinion, so as you said, the moment it's happening here, I feel like it's also happening in a different dimension,
it's mind-boggling. And
it is.
I don't know what practical use it has except for writing science fiction.
Yeah, and it puts you in a state where you just sit there and you just think, when certain things happening, or you're just sitting and you're staring. Maybe it can even be at traffic or something, and you're wondering, wow, where am I right now? What's happening on the other side? This is all just like an illusion, right? How much do we know?
Science fiction has played with these ideas and continues to play with these ideas. And it is, again, one reason I'm drawn to it is because it's the branch of fiction that lets you play with these things in a way that you can't if you're writing what's often called mimetic fiction, which is, just a slice of life kind of thing. Unless you've had some very interesting experiences that tie into this in some fashion. In which case, well, good.
I guess we've all had some sort of experience where we couldn't wonder why that happened at that moment, at that specific time. It happens all around us. There was an author I interviewed once who wrote a book called Science. He's based in New York. And it was on this topic, or a bit branched out to what we're talking about. But I mean, just all the science that are around us each and every single day, that's actually telling us something, and there's meaning behind it. And he also wrote the book based on his own personal experience. And when I was hearing the examples, I was like, yo, I thought it was crazy when this should happen to me, but it happens to all of us. We just need to look, past the veil.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, there's another famous quote from science fiction, which is that the universe is not only stranger than we imagine, it's stranger than we can imagine, which often applies to
yeah. For me, it was more like not reading any fantasy or science fiction. It was more of watching Marvel. Watching Marvel movies. That was like, okay, like how much of it is here. But then you start thinking to yourself, no, wait, they're actually trying to tell us something here. So with your books, okay, you've also branched out illustration to accommodate stories as well.
Yeah, I don't illustrate them myself, but although I
Yeah,
did minor in art in university, and I did editorial cartoons for the newspaper I worked for most of the years that I was there. So I have done some drawing, but not at a level at which I would be willing to put them into a published book these days. One of the things you do as a publisher is you have to find cover art, and sometimes you commission an artist for that. And in the case of Shapers of Worlds, I only did it in the last 2 books, but it so happens that I have a connection to a very talented artist named Wendy Nordell in Calgary. She's my niece, and she had illustrated a collection of my science fiction fantasy poetry that I had published called I Tumble Through the Diamond Dust. And she'd done such a great job on it. No, they were all science fiction fantasy poems that I thought, well, I'm going to include that in the next Kickstarter. I did it as a what they call a stretch goal, I think, in the first one, and hired her to do it. And they were so great, the authors loved them, that I brought her in again this time for sure, not as a stretch goal, but as part of the whole thing, for Shapers of Worlds Volume 5. And it's great to be able to do that. She's very talented. She's done a lot of artwork, and because she had done the book for me originally, she's now done a number of other books. So it's great to be able to kind of get people involved in something that they might not have otherwise on the artistic side. I've had a picture book I published just this last fall called The Wind in Amanda's Cello, and it was fun to find the artist for that. So I scoured the country digitally. I didn't drive and found an artist way out in Nova Scotia of all places. So about as far from here as you could get and still be in Canada. And Newfoundland would be further, but still pretty far. And so I was able to hook her up with the local author, and the book turned out great. So those are some of the great things about being a publisher, is making connections like that happen and giving opportunities to people, whether authors or in this case illustrators.
Yeah. Do you perhaps have a copy of the book there with you to show us an illustration that's there?
I should, but I was short of books and I gave that one away to somebody. And now I don't have it. I was looking, it should be one of my, and no, I don't. But no, I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, we just have to check the book out. Okay. I mean, as far as your work is concerned, it's quite awesome what you're doing and the opportunities you are also creating, for authors and now also illustrators out there. Moving forward, are you just going to stick with like one illustrator with the work that's to come, or you're also going to branch out with illustrators as you've done with authors?
I don't know what else I'll be doing with illustrations. There's nothing currently in the works. Everything that's coming up in the next little while is just text. So I just don't know. It's on a project by project basis. I don't know what will come to me. I don't know how long I'll keep doing this. So I just don't know. And I don't know if I'll illustrate the possible anthology next year or not. I would like to. So I just don't know.
Yeah. Well, you look like you still have like a lot of energy in you, and you're going to be going for quite some time.
I do. I'm fine, but I miss the writing and the publishing. I'm scaling back. I did 20 books last year, and it's just me and the cat. I published 20 books, maybe more, roughly 20 books. And I don't have any kind of staff. I don't have anybody doing this except me. And that was a bit much. So this year I've gone way down. I think I'm only doing 10 books, which is still too much. Next year we'll see. It might only be 4 to 6. And some of them are mine. I can, for various reasons related to grants and professional associations, I'm limited to publishing no more than 25% of what I publish can be by me or by somebody else connected with the company. But it's kind of nice to have a publishing company that I can put my books into, and they get proper distribution, and there's a sales force and all that kind of stuff. So I just don't know, but I'm cutting back and trying to focus more on writing. I have a publisher interested in the book I'm working on now, so I need to finish it. I have a young adult novel that I'm bringing out this year, and I also have a reprint of mine coming out this year. And then we'll see going forward. But I've got so many ideas on notes. Like I have at least 8 novels plotted and ready to go if I ever find the time to write them.
Wow.
And I think at some point the publishing will go away and I will be doing nothing else but writing and living on my meager pension. And the fact that my wife is an engineer, which helps a lot. So.
Man, do you get sleep?
I sleep.
20 books in 1 year, publishing company, podcast, editing. Wow. And you still have time to make your notes, for what's up and coming, what's next. There's definitely different realities going on here. You know what I'm saying? The ideas are just flowing. Wow. And you can still come on to a podcast for an interview, smiling like, it's a walk in the park.
I don't know. People say things like that, and to me, it's just what I do. And I think, well, yeah, I get stressed when I've got deadlines, and it's just me, and I'm desperately trying to get things done. And there are things like the timelines involved in traditional publishing are so enormous, and I'm always behind. So as a result, I'm, sometimes I don't have a chance to get review copies out. So there's marketing things that I think are hurt by the fact that I'm working solo, but I keep plugging away and get done what I can, and the books keep coming out, and they sell, some of them anyway, some copies. So that's good.
I think you hit a spot there when you said I'm working solo. I would have thought, okay, maybe at least you got like a team of 3, going on somewhere there in the back, and you still
just the cat that the publishing company is named after, Shadowpaw, and if he shows up, he's not helping. He's laying across the desk or blocking the screen or something.
So since you also do like a lot of traditional publishing, as well, you work, as you said, there's a publisher that's interested in one of your novels at the moment. How's that relationship? How do you keep that relationship flowing and healthy?
Well, for most of my career, I was published by, well, not for most, since 2005, I think. So for about 20 years, I had 12 novels that came out through Daw Books, which is one of the major science fiction and fantasy publishers in New York. And I had a great relationship with the editors. It was run by Betsy Wollheim and Sheila Gilbert, who were both the publishers and the editors. Sheila was my editor, and the second book they published for me won the Aurora Award for Best Canadian Science Fiction Novel. So that was a good start to things. So for 12 years, 12 novels, I was published by them, and the relationship was really great. I could just, I would talk to Sheila, or I'd send her a note that this is what I'm thinking of doing. And she'd usually say, yes, that's fine. And I would do it. And then that was all there was to it. I was working, just providing a proposal and then writing the book. I didn't have to write the book first. However, Sheila retired, and Daw has been sold to Astra Publishing, and there's new editors there, and I don't really have that connection anymore. So now I'm back to what I was 20 some years ago, which is I have to write the darn book first, which is really annoying. So there's a new publisher that's interested in this, but it's not finished. I'm about 200 pages in, and it's going to take a lot of rewriting after that. But I'm going to plug away. I'll get it finished. So even if hopefully they're interested in it still, and they take it. If they don't, at least I've got another book to start showing around. And there's another one beyond that that's kind of half done that I want to get to. So at the moment, I don't have a tight relationship with any one publisher. But for many years, I was very fortunate in that I did, and it made it a lot of pressure off knowing that you had somebody who was going to publish your next book unless you really screwed something up.
Yeah, well, I mean, at least if they give you a hard time, you just publish it yourself anyway, because I mean, you've been so long in the game, you already have like your fan base and your audience there. You have your community.
Well, the young adult book I'm bringing, or middle grade young adult book that I wrote that's coming out this June, so very soon now, called Fireboy. I wrote it. It was shopped out to a publisher who expressed interest. They sent it back, said, well, but we need you to tone it down a bit. It was a bit too horror for the age group, they thought. So I did that, sent it back. Oh, that's great. We'll consider it. And in the time that they just sat on it and nothing happened, I created my own publishing company and got proper distribution. So I finally sent them a note and said, either tell me you're taking it or I'm taking it back. And they didn't even respond. So I took it back and now I'm bringing it out myself. So in the time that it sat with that other publisher, I created my own publishing company, basically.
Yeah.
Which is the
I
thing
like
with the independent publishing, right? You can do that. There's lots of people that are making way more money than I am, selling way more books than I am. They're not connected to a publishing company of any sort. They may have a name, but it's just their books, and they're just putting them out through Amazon and Ingram and all the other sources. And that has a lot of appeal. And that might be where I end up if I end up just writing, is that I will step back from the publishing and go back to how this all started, which was just ebooks and print on demand. That's all I did for the first 2 or 3 years of Shadowpaw Press. And then somehow I'm where I am now with 20 books last year.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at how the creative industry is now, even if you do get signed by a publisher or you get signed by a record label, and there's a small chance there, you still have to do all the hard work anyway.
Yeah, there's
they don't want to do the hard work. They don't want to do the marketing anymore.
It would be great if you didn't have to, but you do have to market yourself. You really don't have any choice.
Yeah, exactly. So whether you do it independently or you do it through a publisher, you still have to put in the work. You still have to get on that podcast. You still have to do that tour. You still have to do that book signing. You have to do those things. It's not like, okay, I'm going to give the book. They said they're going to publish it. Boom, that's it. That's it for me. I'm just going to sit back, relax, let the royalties roll in. It doesn't work that way.
And I certainly, I didn't exactly think that because I knew better. But at the same time, when my first book came out, I thought, wow, this is great. I finally got a published novel. And then it was like, I got to do more. There wasn't like you published one and then the money came rolling in. There was very little money attached to that or to any of them, really. I just cobbled together a million things that I do to make some sort of regular income. And again, as I said, I didn't quite put it this way, but I often do that. The best career move I ever made was marrying an engineer.
That's true. So, you sorted. No, I mean, it works the same I do, consulting for independent artists. And, they still under this whole thing of, look, okay, I'm going to come into studio. I'm going to put my vocals on this track. I'm going to get it out to market and boom, that's it. You are not going to get a stable income, just on royalties. You need to diversify yourself. You need to branch out, whether it be in sync, whether it be in merchandising, whatever it may be. You need to branch out in order to have a stable monthly income that's going to sustain your career, to allow you to, push quantity out, which is what you're doing. You're pushing out quantity. So it's very important.
The other thing with freelancing, of course, is that it's feast or famine. You can be doing really well, and then for no reason you can tell everything dries up and you got nothing. So it's that ups and downs, I think, that really get people. Certainly it has gotten me a couple of times where oh wow, I got all this work and then something goes away. Like I had a weekly science column that I did on CBC that ran for 17 years, and then all of a sudden it was gone, and I'd kind of gotten used to that. And I had a local TV program that I was hosting, a phone-in show about computers of all things, and they were paying me a little bit every week, and then all of a sudden that was gone. So you never can get too comfortable.
Yeah, no, 100%. One more question I just want to ask, related to what you said earlier on about studying journalism. How would you compare modern day journalism versus when you were doing it?
I barely recognize it. The way that I was taught, and my professor had been a newspaper reporter in Chicago in the 1940s. You think about a tough town for journalism reporting, that must have been. And what I learned about being even-handed and keeping yourself out of the story and not expressing opinion except in the editorial pages and all that sort of thing. I don't see it anymore. Everybody seems to have an agenda that they're trying to push more than anything else. Yeah. And I still go back to just the facts, ma'am.
Yeah.
I don't miss journalism. I kind of did. I mean, I only worked at a weekly newspaper in a small town, a smallish town. By Saskatchewan standards, Weyburn's quite a big town. There's only 10,000 people, and they claimed that when they were only 6,000 people. They kept rounding up. But I did it, and it was fine. But it was never. I only did it because I only went into journalism because I knew I couldn't make a living as a writer right off the bat, and I wanted to do something that involved words. I was never particularly passionate about being a reporter. I was passionate about writing stuff. And so once I got out of journalism, I haven't really missed it.
Yeah. Someone who's so passionate about, what you do and about the industry and passionate about words. What's your take on artificial intelligence and, using it as a creative?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, it does amazing things when you ask it to do things. I use it as a tool, but not for plotting or writing, but for editing. Not even really. I have a book coming out by an author named Mark Morton. It's called Cupboard Love, A Dictionary of Culinary Curiosities. So that's exactly what it sounds like. It's a glossary, alphabetical order, and it talks about where various words related to food and stuff comes from. It's a very funny book too. But because of that, it's got an awful lot of foreign words in it. So a lot of French words and words that have what are called diacritics, the little, accents and little hats and umlauts and all that sort of stuff. And because of the way the manuscript came to me, because it was published 20 years ago, and what I got was basically a scan of a PDF, the scan lost all of those. And this is like a 450-page book. So I turned to AI to look through it and identify where those diacritics were missing on the foreign words, and it caught almost all of them. The author then picked up a few that got overlooked, but so that was a useful tool. Another example was I was driving home from Saskatoon, and I was dictating notes into my phone about the book I'm working on because I was kind of stuck and I wanted to talk it through. So I talked for an hour into the phone. When I came back, I had Grok listen to it, right, transcript of it, read the transcript, and boil it down for me into a couple of pages, hitting everything that I had said or the main points. And so that's a very useful document, and it did a pretty good job. I would never use it for writing anything, but it is a problem because we can't tell necessarily when something comes in if it's AI written or not. There was a magazine called Clark's World, science fiction magazine in the UK, that got so flooded with AI when it first showed up that they had to close submissions because they were just getting flooded with so much AI written stuff. So everybody's struggling with that and what it means. And it's certainly a powerful tool, but, and it's the same with music, right? AI is writing music. AI is writing music. AI is writing screenplays. AI is writing everything. So, yeah.
It's making movies. There's no future for Hollywood.
It's getting, the point may come where I can put my manuscript into an AI program and it creates a Hollywood level movie for me out of nothing.
Yeah.
Well, not out of nothing. What it's really doing is copying a bunch of other stuff and regurgitating it in various fashions. I think that's a long way off at that level, but short clips are certainly coming along. So yeah, who knows? I worry about it somewhat, but at the same time, it's exciting because it's a science fiction thing. So.
Yeah, we're living in phenomenal, interesting times. And as you said, using it as a tool is best practice instead of trying to use it to actually, create what work you actually want to push out.
It can be a powerful tool, but I don't know why we would use it to replace writers and, the things that humans do.
Yeah. I mean, we reference it, as you mentioned, to the music industry, it's becoming so much more easier. And, I'm a curious guy. I have tested it out. I've created AI music as well. I've released the music as well. But of course, full disclosure is there of what this project was about. And, it's crazy what it can do. And the thing is now, I mean, people think that, people really care about, when it comes to listening to a track on Spotify and now that they're busy, with bringing in a new tier for music and so on. But at the end of the day, is that average listener listening to it out there, as long as there's a good, vibe to it and it's making them move a bit, they don't care where it comes from. And that's the scary part about it.
Mhm.
So you're an organic artist and you jump in the studio and you spend about the next month or two just to push out your next single. And then you see a con artist coming into the scene and he's pushing out, a single each and every single day and it's getting monetized. It'll be like, oh, why should I even do it?
Yeah.
So,
well, eventually there
but
won't be anybody online except AIs talking. So it'll be AIs making music for AIs and AIs writing books that AIs then read and boil down. And maybe people will be off somewhere. But maybe we'll just leave the online world to the AIs, and we'll be off handwriting things and playing musical instruments live and all that sort of stuff. So it may become that
yeah,
the
yeah, 100%.
creative stuff becomes an artisan thing, I think is what it might end up being. Just like you can get your Wonder Bread or you can get your artisan loaf from the bakery down the street. Well, you can get your AI story that just pushes whatever buttons you want, or you can get the handcrafted story, certified handcrafted by an actual human being, and it'll become that sort of thing. That's a possibility.
I mean, like as a creator, leverage assets such as AI tools, to assist you, but it also shows how important it is to build a community with your work. Because if you start building a community from now, if you're just starting off now, it's good if you already have a community such as yourself. But the importance of a community, because they're always going to have your back, no matter where AI takes us. You release your work. If they've been following your series, they're going to buy volume 5. If there was a volume 6 coming, they're going to buy it. But the next series, this new era of your work, they're going to buy it because you have your community and they love your work and they enjoy it and they enjoy the stories and the illustrations. So that's so important for a creator. Build your community.
That's the ideal.
Yeah. Edward, it's been a pleasure. To conclude, where can listeners find you online?
I'm readily findable. edwardwillett.com is my website. I'm on X at ewillett. I'm on Instagram at edwardwillett author, and I'm on Facebook at edward.willett. Somehow I missed that memo about having the same handle for everything. But if you go to edwardwillett.com, you can find everything else. And then this publishing company is Shadowpaw Press, all one word.com, and it's on various things as Shadowpaw Press. And the podcast is theworldshapers.com. World, not word. Theworldshapers.com.
Yeah. I'm just thinking in my head, I'm laughing out loud inside here because the last time an author mentioned X, I think it was actually, I asked, are you on X? And then he told me, no, I'm not with a bunch of Nazis. I don't associate myself with a bunch of Nazis on X. And I'm like, I'm on X. But I mean, so it was a laugh out loud moment, and now you started off, by saying X as a social platform. I think, okay,
It's still the biggest thing out there, and it's where all the action is really happening. I mean, I'm on Blue Sky too, and I post stuff there, but I can never remember my handle there. I guess it's Edward Willett. I don't remember. And I'm on a bunch of them that I haven't even mentioned, but I always think of that one. But again, so I've got 1,600 followers on X, and if I'm lucky, a post gets 30 views. So it's not, why am I on there? I don't know, just because I'm on there.
Yeah, no, on this show you get it all, eh? You get it all. But I love the diversity with different beliefs and different platforms, and why I'm on this platform, why I don't want to be on this platform. And I'm just like all for one, I love you anyway.
Yeah, that's my philosophy. I mean, okay, you don't want to be on this one, that's fine. I'm on it. I'm not going anywhere. And as people may find me there that don't find me over where you are because they don't want to be associated with that one. So you got to, it's like I'm just out there. So hopefully some people find me and will find my stuff. That's the only reason I'm even on social media. Otherwise, I'd be off it.
But we're all just good humans, man. Like I respect the guy who wants to be on X, and I respect the guy who doesn't want to be on X. It's cool.
Yeah, I've got lots of friends that left X, and I don't care.
Yeah, exactly. Edward, it's been a great pleasure, meeting you virtually at least, listening to your phenomenal story, your solo career, your solo careers, and all the best, all the best with what lies ahead. And as I said, 65, I can never say that, If I had to see you walking on the street, I would never say. You have so much energy, so much optimism, the smiles, the laughing. So you definitely have a long way to go, and all the best for what's to come, man.
Well, thanks so much.
And I appreciate you. I appreciate you not only for coming onto the podcast, to share your story, but for what you are doing in the creative space as well. It's motivation for me. It's motivation for the listeners. It's motivation for so many creatives out there to just jump in, go for it, live your best life, doing what you love. And if you're lucky enough, you'll find an engineer on the way.
Or a doctor, somebody like that.
Yeah, somebody like that. That's our goal. If we want to get married as a creator, engineer, doctor, maybe an attorney, criminal attorney, that'll do. Yeah. So Edward, thank you so much. Please enjoy the rest of your day. And once again, all the best. Much love, brother.
Thank you so much. Bye.
All right. Bye.